Hey guys, Ezra here and welcome back to another Final Fantasy 7 videos, and I think on this video I want to talk about my first experience for Final Fantasy 7, and why I was so thankful for them, and share you guys my first, encounter with Final Fantasy 7, and how I initially thought about the game, and also share some of my favorite moments in the games, and why I love the game so much, even until today. And now I'm just like anticipating for part 3, just like everybody else, but I think it's nice to go back to to 2020, because I think this is like the 5th anniversary for Final Fantasy 7 Remake, and I think by the time this video releases, it's probably gonna be like I don't know, a couple of days late, from the date, but still I want to make these videos, because I've been planning to make this video since like 2024, because I love this game so much, and yeah, I mean, here we are, right? But yeah, either way, let's just start immediately. I think for the I'm gonna talk about my, again, first time seeing Final Fantasy 7. So for my first experience seeing Final Fantasy 7 was back in obviously back in 2020. I was still in high school, and I remember seeing a Jacksepticeye video playing, like, I think he plays a demo of Final Fantasy 7 Remake, and at the time I thought that, oh, the demo looked cool, and it feels like there is a bunch of people waiting for this game to be released, so I thought that, oh, this game is a big deal, right? And I remember Jacksepticeye saying that, stay tuned for the full series, and I think I think Final Fantasy 7 Remake released in April 10, right? So like, I think the demo was released like a month before, I think. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait for that. But he never did, he just plays the game on his own spare time, and I think Jack said that he never finished it, so there's that, but honestly for me, at the time I thought that, oh, okay, well, I'm just gonna not following this game, like not exactly checking out this game, because like I said, I watched this game, guys, I can't exactly play the game because it was expensive, and back in the day I don't have a PlayStation 4 that even doesn't even have a PlayStation 5 now because they're so expensive, and I don't have enough money to bought this game. I want to buy it, I want to play it myself, and maybe even stream it on my channel, but like, again, it's pretty impossible right now because I don't have enough money, so that's my reason, so that's why I keep like saying that I'm watching Final Fantasy 7. I'm not lying, I'm watching the game, but yeah, after that, I decided to go for full 2 months, without even following Final Fantasy 7 again, but I do remember that, and I was like, oh, that's kind of disappointing that Jack did not play the game, and it ending up being a blessing in disguise in a way, because I decided to, what, I was bored, in June, because like COVID just happened, right? So everything was locked down, and I was so bored, so I thought that, well, I might as well watch Final Fantasy 7. Why not? Because I've been planning to see that, right? So I decided to find like a channel, like a brand new channel that doesn't know anything about Final Fantasy 7, just like I do, so we can be on the same page, So I found this channel called Wellos, and then I decided to follow her playthrough to Final Fantasy 7, and I remember falling in love with the game immediately. I love the characters, I love the music, I love the world, and most importantly, I was intrigued by the story and to see how it's gonna head it in the future, until I remember this is only like part 1, and I think at the time they didn't reveal how many parts they were, so I thought that, oh, okay, this is gonna be an exciting game in the future, but yeah, I remember falling in love with the game immediately, and after I finished seeing the game, I was remember loving the game so much, so I decided to watch Maximilian Dood, because when I was searching for other channel to play Final Fantasy 7, because at the time, again, Jacksepticeye did not play the game, so I thought that, well, I might as well find another content creators, right? And then I remember YouTube recommend Maximilian Dood's playthrough like a lot, so that's why I decided to check it out, after I finished my first watch, I guess, like my first binging Velos series, for Final Fantasy 7 Remake, and I decided to rewatch the series. This is my hobby back in the day, where I was just like rewatching the Let's Play by other content creators, just to see how they handle the game, and how they thought about the stories and the characters. I used to do that a lot, so that's why I decided to do that with Maximilian Dood, and my god, the experience becomes a lot more special for me, because like Max is just like the best, because he is a veteran of, Final Fantasy 7 fans, so it's actually really more exciting for me to watch like what a veteran Final Fantasy 7 players react to the remake elements, and how much they improved that elements from the original Final Fantasy VII, you know. And I remember seeing his reaction, and he was so enthusiastic about everything, you know. But I think my favorite moment of Maximilian Dood's Let's Play is actually from the Hell House boss fight, you know. I remember when I first saw that, I was like, wait a second, this is just a big house, like what the hell? This enemy is so weird, you know. And then Max explaining that, oh, he was actually expecting the Hell House to appear in like in an alleyway or something like that, you know, because it's supposed to be like an enemy from the original Final Fantasy VII, you know, but obviously they didn't put that because it's a weird enemy, you know, and people just like, oh, like maybe in the remake they're gonna put the Hell House, you know. And then the developers clearly listening to the fans, obviously, you know, because they put the Hell House as a boss fight in chapter 9, you know. And you know, seeing Max's reaction to that, I was like, what the hell? They put him into like a boss fight, like, you know, like a main character. It's like, holy shit, you know. And seeing him fighting the Hell House, it was so much fun, you know. It was so special, you know. And yeah, it's like it's much more fun to watch his playthrough, because again, I got to learn more about Final Fantasy VII that way, you know. And I got to learn more about how they changed or like expanding certain things, you know, from the original games, you know, and how much they improve certain storylines and characters, you know. So I think that's absolutely fantastic, you know. And that's why I just follow Maximilian Dood's Let's Play, you know, from then on, you know, and including watching the original Final Fantasy VII from 97, obviously, you know. And yeah, it's really, really fun, you know. But yeah, after this, I want to talk about the, I guess a little bit about the history of Final Fantasy VII, you know, but I also want to talk about the stories and the characters, you know. And I guess I want to give you guys a bit of perspective, I guess, you know, that I think is really interesting, you know. And I'm pretty sure, like, veteran Final Fantasy VII fans obviously already know about this, you know, but at the time, we got the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, you know, which ending up in Dearth of Cerberus, you know. And the compilation of Final Fantasy VII isn't exactly a good compilation because the dialogue is really cringy because it feels like Nojima or like whoever responsible for writing the compilations, you know, just really trying so hard to be, you know, like super edgy and just like really serious all the times, you know, but it doesn't really work, you know, and it's just becoming really cringy, you know. And I think people criticize the compilations, you know, because I think it doesn't represent the original Final Fantasy VII characters, you know, that the characters becomes completely different than who they were originally, you know. And I think that's why, you know, people don't really like the compilation, you know. Even though I like Advent Children, I like Crisis Core, you know, some aspect of it, you know. I like Zack, obviously, but Dearth of Cerberus is absolutely the worst compilation of Final Fantasy VII, man. It was just so bad. The dialogue is bad, and there is no direction at all, you know. So that's like the last time we see Final Fantasy VII, you know. So I can only imagine that, you know, at the time, the veteran fans of Final Fantasy VII, they're probably so excited for the remake, you know, which was announced in 2015. It doesn't come out until 5 years later, which is insane on its own, because there is like a company problem, I think, which I'm not gonna get into that, you know. But yeah, it's actually really, really cool to see how veteran players like Maximilian Dood react to the dialogue of the games, you know, because like again, remember the dialogue from Final Fantasy VII was last time was from Dearth of Cerberus, and Dearth of Cerberus has a really terrible dialogue, you know. And then he was worried that maybe the remake is gonna have a similar elements to the dialogue, you know, but thankfully no, like the dialogue for all the characters are absolutely fantastic, you know. And I think Nojima really learns from like the compilation mistakes that he did, you know. That I know that he's not the sole person that responsible for writing the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, you know, because there is a bunch of other developers as well that are working on it, you know. But yeah, Nojima is the one who write the main scenario for the remake trilogy, and same thing with the OG Final Fantasy VII, I think. And I think he does learn some lesson from the compilation and decide to portray the character as a human, literally as a normal human being, you know, that actually has a normal dialogue and has a good chemistry with one another, you know, and that becomes like the strongest elements for Final Fantasy VII, you know. So I think this game is also like a redemption, I guess, for the compilation in a way, even though they're still acknowledging that, which I think that's cool. But I do think that it's really, really cool to see how much the team has improved their storytelling and dialogue, you know. I know that it's not perfect, you know, but I think it's really great, man, you know, because I love it so much, you know. But moving on to the story and characters, you know, I really love all the characters, to be honest, you know, from the first game as well. And I think it's also insane to see how small the first game was compared to the second one, you know, how big the world was and how much characters they got introduced in the sequels, you know. But in the first one, we only have 5, you know. We got Cloud, we got Tifa, we got Aerith, and then we got Barrett and Red 13 as our main characters, our main characters, and then but we also have other characters as well, like Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge, and these three are also really really good characters, and their role are actually are much more expanded in the remake trilogy, and yeah, man, I remember when I got first introduced to Cloud, I was like, oh, he's a cool looking character, but he's kind of like a dickhead in a way. And then it's really interesting to see how different his character works, by the time you get to the end of Final Fantasy 7, and learn about the twist for what happened to his character. Like, it's absolutely fantastic, how much you can actually see, like, the teasing from the developers from the very first game, to see what's gonna happen in the futures, and I think, again, like I said before, the chemistry between the characters are absolutely fantastic, especially when obviously my favorite characters from Final Fantasy 7 is Tifa Lockhart, and I think she's such an amazing female character, I think she's really, really likable, she's a badass, she's beautiful, right? And it's like, yeah, she's an absolutely amazing character, and I love the chemistry between her and everybody else, like everybody has a great chemistry, between, obviously Cloud and Barrett has a great chemistry, and I think Tifa and Aerith also have a great chemistry in the game, where they're starting to become besties, I love that a lot, and I think, yeah, every character is great, man, even Red 13 when it got introduced in the end there, it was absolutely fantastic, but yeah, but I would say this though, I really enjoyed the pacing of the story in the first game, because like again, it's not exactly a big game, it's still a pretty big game, but like compared to Rebirth, it's like pretty small now, and the story is actually pretty linear, and I think I remember seeing the several of the segment, from the game itself, and how much linear it was, and it was like so fantastic, because I remember the sequence of event from the remake, compared to Rebirth, because Rebirth just like so big that I don't even remember the pacing that well, but I remember loving it, so there's that. But for the remake, I was like, damn, yeah, this is actually a really really good pacing, I love it so much, like you got to introduce to Tifa and Barrett, and then you got to introduce the Avalanche members, and then you get to do introduce to Aerith, and then obviously Red 13 eventually. Like, it's absolutely amazing how well I think this game was paced, and I think that's why I think this game is it's a bit more special compared to Rebirth for me, because I think it's my first introduction to Final Fantasy 7, of course, and I think it's also like I think even like Max also talked about how the hype for Rebirth cannot be beaten by the hype for Remake, because the Remake is the first time we get to experience what Final Fantasy 7 Remake was, but now, like, since we already got that idea, then I think it's kind of like less exciting in a way, but I think it's understandable, right? So that's why I think Remake is a bit more special for some people, I think including myself, even though I love Rebirth, but I think Remake has a lot more impression for me, I remember this game a lot, and like theorizing what's happening in the end a lot, and I think I have a lot of fun with that, and I think the pacing is absolutely amazing. And after this, I want to talk about my favorite chapter in the game, which is chapter 9, which I think is a really generic chapters, but I also like chapter 3, where it's about Tifa, so there you go. I think chapter 3 and chapter 9 is the two chapters that I really really rewatch a lot of them, because I think chapter 3 just like where the game kind of slows down and kind of introduce you to the slums, and then to Tifa, and then you have to team up with her, and then to see this like hilarious NPC dialogue, where some of the NPC characters basically hitting on Tifa, and then they see Cloud around, and then they got so pissed at Cloud, but like they not to Tifa, but they were so angry at Cloud, I think that was a really really funny interaction, and I love that, because it makes the world and the city more lively, and I think, yeah, it's absolutely fantastic to learn about the slum for the first time, and of course, like chapter 9 is because like the wall market, so like a lot of the side quests was absolutely fun, like obviously the Hell House battle, like I mentioned before, is absolutely amazing, and then you have the Madam M sequence, where if you get the luxury course, and then you see Cloud being massaged in the hand, and then like he basically let out this like it's a really funny noise, where he basically just like like it was so funny for me, especially coming from Cloud, because like Cloud in this game, even though he was nice, he's still like a bit more tough, like he's like a tough guy act essentially, you know, so that's why it's a bit more brooding in a way. And then to see Cloud reacting like that, you know, by when he got a massage from Madam M is absolutely hilarious, man. I was dying, you know. And then of course I have to bring up the dance scenes, man. Like the dance sequence in Honeybee Inn is absolutely fantastic, you know. I think the way they choreograph the dance, you know, and the way you play the game afterwards, you know, because I think you have to play some QTEs on that segment, you know, which I think could be a bit bothering for some people, you know. But yeah, I remember just like, again, because I watched the game, so I was like really paying attention to the dance sequence, you know, by Cloud and I think Andrea, right? And it was absolutely hilarious, man. You know, I'm really hoping that in third game, both Cloud and Tifa probably could perform in the Honeybee Inn. Maybe that would be really cool, you know, because I just want to see Cloud dance again, you know, because I think in Rebirth he does kind of dance a little bit, you know, which is like a break dance in the Gold Saucer, you know, which is really fun. But that's it, you know. So I really want to see a full-on performance by Cloud and maybe Tifa in the Honeybee Inn, you know. But again, who knows what's gonna happen, you know, because I just want this character to have fun, you know. But yeah, that's why I think also Don Corneo, which I think is a really scummy villain, you know, but I feel like I love the way they portray him, you know, in this game, and how much that he's such a comical villain in a way. Like it was such a fun antagonist to have, you know. And I remember it was so hilarious where you get to see Tifa and Aerith, you know, and then you have to see and then you have Cloud dressing as a woman, right? Because like they try to get Corneo's like attention and then try to be alone with him, you know, try to interview, or was an interview, basically try to ask more information about why there is a bunch of people looking for Barrett, you know, so an avalanche, right? So that's why they go to the wall market, you know. And I know that some people might think that the wall market might be a bit more, it feels like a filler at times, you know, but I feel like it's a really fun filler, man. Like I think I don't really complain about that, you know, because I have a lot of fun watching it, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are having a lot of fun time playing the chapter itself, you know, because it was so ridiculous, you know. So but anyway, back to the story then. Yeah, it's so hilarious that Cloud that Don Corneo decided to choose Cloud out of all things, you know. They like, he has a two beautiful ladies standing right next to Cloud, but he just like grabbing Cloud and then decided to take him as the prize, you know. So it's like, it's so funny, you know. But yeah, and then Tifa and Aerith kicking ass and teaming up, that was really fun, you know. But yeah, and here's the thing about chapter 9, guys. He has an after effect, right? So here's the thing. After finishing chapter 9, I remember feeling so blown away by how ridiculous everything was, you know, because like previously it was like, oh, story elements, you know, like from the slums, and then you get to the Shinra building with Tifa and Barrett, you know, and then you try to blow up the reactor, right? You know, so it's like, the story was pretty much in line, you know. And even when we get to Aerith, I was like, okay, we're gonna spend more time in the slum, but this time with Aerith, you know, which is cool, you know. I like that, you know. But in chapter 9, that's where things get super crazy, you know. I think that's like the wildest part from Final Fantasy VII Remake, you know. Unlike Rebirth, where I think Rebirth has a lot more wild moments in them, you know. But I think for Remake, it's only chapter 9, you know. So that's why I think this chapter really stand out for me. And I was like, I remember have to cool down and remember there's some serious storyline in the game, you know. Because after you leave there, I was like, okay, like I was actually still cooling down from chapter 9 because how big and how ridiculous everything was. And I was like, okay, calm down, we're gonna focus more on the story now. We're in the sewers, you know, and then we're gonna get to the Ghost Rain, and then we have to get to the Sector 7 to save some people, you know. But like, even after getting to that chapter, I still feel the chapter 9 effects, you know. It feels so weird for me, but in a good way, that it feels like it really affects me in a way that I'm just like, wow, okay. Because again, I thought that because the chapter was fun, I was like, okay, fine, it's gonna be like a fun chapter and that's it, you know. But no, I remember that and I felt that it has a full-on effect throughout the rest of my watch through, you know, for Final Fantasy VII Remake, you know, that it has a long-lasting impression, you know. So I think that's how good chapter 9 was, you know. So yeah, that's my favorite chapter so far, you know, alongside with chapter 3, you know. But yeah, you know, now I want to talk about, I guess, people reaction, you know, when they first announced Final Fantasy VII Remake, you know, because like after I finished watching, you know, the playthrough, that's where I decided to rewatch some of the reveal reaction, you know, for like a lot of the veteran fans of Final Fantasy VII, you know. And I remember watching the remake announcement in 2015. I guess like watching the video for the first time in 2015, you know, about the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I remember watching Maximilian Dood reaction, you know. I also remember watching a lot of like YouTubers reaction back in the day, you know, and how crazy everybody get, you know, when they announced the remake in 2015, you know, even though that it was 5 years late, you know, that it came out in 2020, you know, but still the reaction from remake in 2015 is absolutely amazing, you know. Everybody was so hyped and everybody was so excited, you know, to see this game, you know, like finally we get a remake. It was so amazing, you know. And I think I kind of hate that I missed that, you know, but to be honest, I kind of feel good that I actually did not experience that, you know, because again, if I experienced that means I have to wait for 5 years to get Final Fantasy VII Remake, you know. But now it's just like, okay, I could just like rewatch people reaction, you know, and learn about the history of the development of Final Fantasy VII in a way, you know. So I think, yeah, the reaction is absolutely fantastic and emotional in a way, you know. But the other reaction that I remember is actually the Tifa Lockhart reveal, you know, because like people has been I think at the time Tifa was like the last character that they revealed. I think the last big character that they revealed back in 2019, you know. And I remember the audience like cheering and screaming for Tifa, you know. And it was like, yeah, I mean, now it's like in retrospective, it's like, yeah, it makes sense, you know, because I think Tifa is such an amazing character. And yeah, a lot of people really love Tifa Lockhart, you know. And I think Square does realize that, you know. And that's why I think it's just like the last, I think it's just like the last character that's revealed in the trailer, you know, because I don't think they get like a reveal trailer for Red 13, you know, because I remember Red 13 was in the final trailer, but I don't think that they dedicate like Red 13 as a big moment in the trailer reveals, you know. But like for Tifa, they kind of did that, you know, where they showed the gameplay, they showed the other characters, you know, and then they decided to show Tifa finally, you know. And it was like, yeah, it's a big scream, it's a big cheer, and it's absolutely amazing, you know. And yeah, I completely understand, you know, because it's just a very likable characters, you know. And I kind of wait for part 3, because I think in part 3 Tifa is gonna have a bigger role than before, you know. And I think it's gonna be absolutely amazing, you know, to see her development even further, you know. And yeah, I know what's gonna happen because I already watched the original game, so I know that Tifa is gonna eventually lead the party members at some point when we lost Cloud in the Northern Craters, you know. So, and then obviously the Modil live stream sequence, you know. So like, yeah, there's a lot of like Tifa moment in part 3, and I cannot wait for that, you know. So yeah, besides the reaction and my opinion on the stories, you know, I think I want to talk a little bit about the reception about the ending, you know, because I think it's interesting that some people did not like the ending of Final Fantasy VII Remake, you know, because it does like deviate from what the original ending was, you know. And I think they even released like a poster, I think, you know, where you see the characters like looking through the horizon in the Midgar like highway, you know. And I think, or you know, artwork, I think people just assume that, oh, we're gonna see them just like standing in the highway, and then they're gonna look on to the outside of Midgar and finally seeing like maybe teasing the outside location, you know. And then like and then that's how the game will end, you know. And it becomes like a really safe ending, you know, which I get it, but that's not how it ends, you know. Like the ending is actually just a bunch of like, you fight this giant whispers, you fight this like entity from the future timeline, which I'm assuming is like the characters from Advent Children, right? And then you see Sephiroth, you know. They also talk about fate, you know, like, and then like changing fate, I guess, you know. And Zack also appear in the end, you know, and eventually reveal that maybe he's alive, maybe he survived the event itself, you know. Like it's also like a bunch of things that happens in the end, you know. So I think that's why some people did not like it, you know. But I remember at the time, you know, because I did not have any again, I'm not exactly an OG fan, you know. So that's why I thought that's how Final Fantasy VII Remake end, you know, in the original game, you know. So I thought that, oh, okay, that's normal, I guess. You know, even though it was super weird, you know. And then I learned that no, that doesn't happen at all, you know. The pretty much in the original game, the party member pretty much just like leave Midgar and then that's it, you know. So it's like, oh, okay, so that's not what happened, and that's why people are upset about that, you know. But I think same thing could be said about the ending of Rebirth, you know, which I think the execution was really weird, you know. But I think the idea from these two games ending is actually really intriguing for me, you know. And I remember after that I was engaging with the theorizing about Final Fantasy VII, you know, what it means, you know, people talking about different timeline, you know, different worlds, you know, how it was in fact a recall, you know, remake sequel from the original Final Fantasy VII, you know. It still could be, but I guess we'll see what happens, you know. Definitely interesting to see how people's reaction was a bit different at the time, you know. But I feel like right now, I think more people are more, you know, accepting of the ending, you know, because I think the idea of these two ending, in my opinion at least, are pretty interesting, you know, to see how they're gonna lead to part 3 in a way, you know. So hopefully part 3 can actually land the ending, you know, and doesn't fuck it up, you know, because I think there is a chance they could fuck it up, you know. But I honestly I want to have faith with the developers, you know, because so far I think they know what they're doing, regardless of your opinions about the whispers, like the changing fate stuff, but I think when they just focusing more on the original game elements and try to expand them, then they did a great job, like they have a great direction, great music as well, I haven't talked about the music, but like they sound great, because I think I fell in love with music from the game for the first time in Fantasy 7. It's absolutely amazing, but yeah, so they did a lot of great things, for 90% of the time, and then like 10% of the plot point is kind of like dividing some people, which is fine. I understand that, but I want to be optimistic about part 3 in a way, so yeah, either way, the message from the game, I think I love the meta elements from the game itself. I think one of the my favorite line in Final Fantasy 7 was actually, Cloud saying that, that black and white walls of yours are, to Barrett, because at the time Barrett thinks that, oh, all people at Shinra are bad guys, but obviously it was revealed that not all of them are bad. Some of them are just like working, some of them are just normal people, so I think that's also adds another great elements to the storyline itself, and I think it's absolutely fantastic, but yeah, that line actually really applies to my life a lot, where, and I guess to the internet culture as well, where I feel like that line also really speaks for a lot of the fandoms in a way, where it's like, that black and white walls of your high, because I feel like not everything is black and white, not everything is certain, so like there is a couple of things that we have to consider before we just immediately, judging someone or like judging a place, so I think that's a really, really good message as well, and yeah, that line really stuck with me, so that's a really, really good line, and I also love the theme about loss, where every single character in this game lost someone or their loved ones, their home, like the Nibelheim, obviously, right? So that's why all the characters are connecting to one another, and I think that's a really, really beautiful message, the fact that your life is important because someday you're gonna lose them, someday you're gonna die, and that's why your life is so important, and you have to appreciate that, once while you're still here, so I absolutely love that a lot, guys, but yeah, I think that's it for the videos, because I think, I mean, yeah, I did talk about my first experience, and the timeline of certain things, and my favorite chapter, my favorite characters, and why I love this game so much, I think the chemistry between the characters are like the main highlight for me, and that's why I love this game so much, because if you have a character that doesn't have like a good chemistry with one another, then yeah, it's gonna be boring, so that's why I think Final Fantasy 7 really excels on that, because they know how to write certain characters, because all the characters have their own problem or conflict, but they do have great chemistry with one another, because they could relate to one another based on the their storyline, But yeah, either way, guys, that's it for the videos, I know this is a pretty long videos, I don't know exactly writing a script for this video, so I'm just gonna like talking from my head, like the topic that I want to talk about, I apologize if the video sounds a bit gibberish, I'm really, really sorry, guys, but yeah, again, I'm really hoping that I can get my point across, in this videos, and I'm really hoping that everybody can be nice to me, in case this video like getting watched by many fans, in case, who knows, I don't think so, but I guess we'll see, I'm really hoping that people can be nice, and understand why I wanted to make these videos, I know that I said I did not play the game, I just watched the game, but again, I really wanted to play the game, man, but I just don't have enough money to buy the game, so that's why I just like, talking about it since the very beginning, since 2024 on the very same channel, ever since I cover, Ever Crisis storyline there. And, I just want to talk about the things that I love, because I love this game, and I want to talk about it, and with some fans, I think that would be really, really nice, so. But I know Final Fantasy 7 fandoms can be really, really wild, like some of them are even super crazy in a way, so I'm really hoping that everybody can be more understandable and accept why I decided to watch the game, because again, don't have enough money to buy the game, so I apologize for that. Maybe in the future I can actually, like have enough money to buy that, but either way, yeah, I hope everybody's understandable enough, because I don't need any more, toxicity in the fandom, because I know how toxic Final Fantasy 7 fandom could be, trust me, I've been on Twitter. It's absolutely it's just a shit show in that platform, so hopefully it doesn't get to hear on my channel, but either way, that's it for the videos, guys, you know. And I guess stay tuned for more Final Fantasy 7 videos in the future, you know. I plan to make one video about Hojo, to be honest, you know, so stay tuned for that, you know. But either way, thank you for watching this video, guys, you know. And if you guys enjoyed it, make sure, guys, you know, slash the subscribe and like button, guys, you know. Share the videos, the usual stuff, you know. And stay tuned for more videos in the future. And again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one then. Bye.